for a very long time now. And today,
the meme? I'm sorry. The meme
please.
that's like the gentleman like leaned over with his drink and a glass where he says like, "Oh man, what a week!" And it's like, "Captain, it's Wednesday."
Wednesday.
It's like it's Tuesday. Captain, it's Tuesday.
John's like, "Oh man, the CTF's been crazy, huh?" I'm like, "John, it's only the halftime show." Anyway, welcome in. Hello, everybody. It's been a real joy to close out the CTF, and we're here today to talk a little bit about some of the more technical aspects, have a little bit of fun with like challenge design, and talk a little bit about what went into the CTF and that kind of stuff. But yeah, Tradecraft Tuesday, come on in, take a seat anywhere you want. You can move up like to the front. All right. We're like, I'd appreciate if some of you moved up to the front, or else I feel like I'm talking to an empty auditorium. Yeah. Where are we all coming in from? Austin. Oh, that's Cody. Hey, Cody in Austin, Oklahoma.
Yeah, if I may echo, I think we've done a good many of these webinar, live stream extravaganzas to kind of chat about the capture the flag. But it's been like a high level sort of, hey, let's discuss the feedback or what the game is looking like, given the updates. Hey, trying to get what we're seeing with players doing what challenges are kind of fun and very, very fluffy. But I'm hoping what we can do today is really actually showcase, get a little bit nerdy, and dive into some of the code as to how either a couple of challenges are built, what the inspiration was, walk through a solution, and really just nerd out. So I'm very excited. I hope you don't mind. This is the one where we get to really let our hair down. And you heard us just goofing off, memeing at the very start, but should be a ton of fun.
It's about to get nerdy up in here is essentially what we're saying here. So hold on to your butts, as they say in Jurassic Park. Dr. John Hammond over there. Canada, Richmond, Virginia, Fort Worth, Argentina. Ooh.
We're
Athens,
global. It's kind of
nice.
Crazy.
Misters worldwide. Yeah. All right. 2 minutes past. You say we kick it, boys? What do you think?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Tradecraft Tuesday, Capture the Flag edition, or Capture the Flag webinar stream, Tradecraft Tuesday edition. We're not totally sure which one's which, but regardless, we're happy you're here. We're going to talk a little bit about what went into the CTF design, challenge design, and really the big focus today is this idea of, we at Huntress have seen a lot, all right? We've seen a lot of malware. We've seen a lot of CVEs. We've done a lot of rapid responses. We've cut our teeth in the realm of cyber, and we draw a lot of inspiration from a lot of these events that we have survived is maybe the wrong word to use, but these events that we've gone through, right? And so we decided, because we've been doing the CTF for the second year now, which just concluded, we, of course, during the design of the CTF, needed a lot of inspiration for some of the challenges that we wanted to put together. So where better to look for inspiration than like the events that Huntress has kind of like, dealt with? That's a good one, right? Malware and CVEs and web application exploitation and things that have happened to the SMB that are culturally significant within Huntress, right? So that's what we're here to talk about today. So this is the finale of the CTF part 2. We're going to be talking about distilling TTPs into CTF challenges. That's the agenda. Moving on. We dem boys. It's me, it's John, it's Adam. You know us, you've seen us if you've been watching the other CTF streams, but we're all either security researchers or security engineers here at Huntress. And we are here today to talk about everything that went into the CTF. But first, let's go ahead and shout out just everybody that had some kind of contribution to the challenges of the CTF, because this is a gargantuan effort. And the three of us certainly couldn't have done it alone. And that's to say nothing of the challenge infrastructure and the support that we had, like the help desk that was answering tickets and stuff. So like everybody on this screen, plus a bunch that we left off here, but like everybody on the screen contributed to challenge development, right? And so this just throwing out just our immense gratitude for everybody that brought some challenges here. A lot of really cool challenge concepts that came from like our SOC analysts, so like Austin and Adrian and Jose, and like a lot of cool kind of challenge ideas from like, Tiggs and Izzy and Udi. So just like a whole, and a really cool challenge idea from Dave. That was the 1200 transmissions, right?
Yeah.
So just a lot of like a ton of creativity, a ton of interesting challenge design and development. So thank you again to everybody that you see on this screen right now. And thank you to a lot of people that we did not include here that helped out like support and just keeping the engine running, right? So yeah, this is everybody that that contributed. There are others that are not up here that also contributed, but that is not to lessen their impact as well. And we just want to say thank you. We could not, the three of us on stage right now could not have done this all by ourselves. So we just want to say thank you. And of course, we do have the top 10 leaderboard, just everybody that placed in top 10. Now, top 50 got prizes, but the top 10, I think, deserves, hey, just a little special call out. Here's Unbeliever, of course, taking the #1 spot, up from third or second, really, depending on how you look at it from last year. We've also got some repeats. We've seen some of the teams that came placed on the leaderboard at some level last year and are back and are higher up on the leaderboard. So that's super cool to see, right? Mouse Jiggler's in there, Hack Smarter, Tyler Ramsby's squad there, taking the 10th spot. But again, if you played, if you placed, if you're in the top 10, if you're not in the top 10, doesn't matter. You played, you put it out on the field, and we just want to say thank you for that. So really good time. Anything to add, boys? Or I don't know. I'm super impressed with how everybody placed on the leaderboard this year.
Yeah, definitely. Couldn't agree. There were a lot of really cool teams this year. So boiling it down to top 10 feels like we cut a lot of people out, but we only had one slide.
Exactly. So anyway, let's get to the meat and potatoes of Tradecraft Tuesday today, right? And that's a little idea that I kind of called Tradecraft translation, or well, if you saw the subtitle from earlier, it's distilling TTPs into CTF challenges. So let's start by saying that in a general sense, and I think everybody can agree, CTFs are usually pretty zany. So John, I think you should recognize a couple of these challenges up here, but like I wanted to see if we could find old screenshots from like VersecCon 2020 and just the heyday of the zany CTF challenges. But basically, if you're not familiar, if for some of you, Huntress may have been the only CTF that you've played. That's super cool. Welcome to the game. But if you've played a lot of CTFs, you know that there's kind of like a vocabulary. There's like an attitude almost of CTFs. They're very zany. They're very like wacky in certain ways. You see that like on the left side of the screen here, we're playing like poker with a terminal prompt. And then in the middle of the screen here, you SSH into the CTF challenge instance and you're in jail and it says, don't even get any ideas. There's no way out. And that's like the crux of the challenge. And then even in the CTF from this year, we also had things like Sekiro, and Sekiro only scratches the surface. Like we brought out some wacky CTF challenges this year, but like, all of this kind of is encompassed by this idea that there is kind of like a wackiness, a kind of a bit of levity, if you will, like a very like non-serious quality to CTFs a lot of the time. And that's because they're games. They're supposed to be fun, right? They're supposed to be just how to kind of unwind and maybe get together with your hacker friends and try to place on the leaderboards. You're either competitive about it, you're not competitive about it. Doesn't matter. You're going to have a good time, right? And that's what you see a lot on the screen here. But I want to say that there is actually, that's not like a hard and fast rule, right? So any way that you want to develop a CTF is the right way. If you present challenges that hackers can kind of overcome by applying their wit, their cunning, their clever, that is a great way to run a CTF. But over at Huntress, we kind of do it. We honor the tradition of yesteryear while also bringing a kind of Huntressy quality to it, right? And I submit that one of the core things that we wanted to bring to the CTF this year, interestingly enough, is the idea of instructional design and education theory, right? Now, follow me on this, because I know that sounds a little wacky, okay? But check this out. Outside of battling samurais and prompts and playing poker and SSHing into like an Amazon client that asks you to purchase things, right? Outside of that, we wanted to bring our wealth of Huntress experience to the CTF and in a lot of ways put you into the shoes, the well-worn Converse high tops of one of our SOC analysts, or maybe one of our threat researchers, or maybe one of our exploit developers, right? And so there is kind of like a shadow curriculum to the CTF, right? And the shadow curriculum here is to place the players into what's known as the zone of proximal development in educational theory and instructional design theory. And the zone of proximal development is this beautiful little place where you confront players with things that they can do if they push themselves and they self-study a little bit, right? And so if you're one layer up from that, that's like, it's so hard that you don't even know where to begin. And if you're one layer below from that, it's like, it's so easy that it's like you could do it in your sleep, right? But then there's the zone of proximal development, which is like, you understand the concepts, you understand generally what you need to do, but you're not totally sure how to get there. And you need to really familiarize yourself with the challenge itself until you understand where to put the puzzle pieces in place. And that is like the shadow curriculum of the Huntress CTF, is to put you in that zone of proximal development in regards to things like malware reverse engineering and exploit development and cybersecurity defensive and offensive concepts, right? Because exposure to those in the safe, familiar, gamified land of the CTF builds confidence, right? So we had that as kind of like an objective of building the CTF, which is to put players into the shoes of a Huntress SOC analyst or an exploit developer or a threat analyst or something like that, and push them a little bit and have them have them build confidence in skills that you can directly, immediately translate into like the cybersecurity space, right? Sound about right, guys? I think that's kind of like how we wanted to approach this one. So a little bit of ed theory, a little bit of instructional design, right? So what we needed to do as challenge devs in that case is to distill those concepts into CTF challenges, right? And so all of the design and all of the considerations that went into that are what you see in the design of the CTF challenges. And so now that's what I call Huntress, right? So this is like, we've taken our experiences at Huntress and tried to distill them into different types of CTF challenges. Now, up at the top of the screen here, I just ran down the list. I mean, like, we have 3 that we're going to cover in detail today, but really like the DNA of like the kind of like, you know, SOC analyst perspective and the exploit development perspective and the rapid responses that we've done, the DNA of that is imbued into lots of different challenges. This isn't exhaustive. There are other challenges that had like, you know, a little bit of that DNA in it as well. But I just wanted to call out a couple of them, right? So like Ocean Locust was a kind of a reimagining of the Ocean Lotus malware, that this crazy, wild, wacky malware sample that we found earlier this year. Little Shop of Hashes is like a forensic recreation of an attack chain that featured PS exec. EP was just a sleep obfuscator, which is open source by Cracked Spider. Rustline, a rusty reimplementation of the Redline stealer. Zippy, of course, was sysaid. So from last year, there was a sysaid path traversal and remote code execution. So anyway, I think you see the point. Like a lot of these challenges have this, like, we took an idea that happened in the real world and then distilled it into like a CTF challenge effigy, right? A little thing that we could give to the players to say, it's not gonna be one for one, but it's gonna rhyme, I think is how I would like to describe it. And we're gonna put you into the shoes of the challenge or the you know, Huntress staff that were responding to that kind of thing, right? So up first, I want to start with slash and grab, which by the CTF challenge name was HelpfulDesk, right? So a tribute, an effigy, a loving recreation, if you will, of slash and grab from earlier this year. So let's just recap, just so we're all on the same page. It is February of 2024. And I am relaxing on a beach in the Virgin Islands, and I take a sip out of my coconut and I stretch a little bit and move so that I can get back into the sun after it has moved a little bit. And I look down at my phone, and wouldn't you know it, there is a massive CVE against Screen Connect, good old Screen Connect. And John, of course, remembers this because he was there in the room. But effectively, what ended up happening was ConnectWise puts out a bulletin, does not give us really any details to go off of, but just says, like, if you have an on-prem version of Screen Connect that you're hosting, you need to patch this like right now. And then Huntress like responded to that. There's this whole, I mean, we've done webinars on this, so you like go back and watch those if you want. But basically, what we had to do was like figure out, because ConnectWise wasn't going to come out and tell us exactly what was going on. So we had to get creative with how we figured that out, right? And so this is like 0-day recreation 101. And so how you approach that is, and again, write this down, we're going to test you later. You take the facts of this particular CVE, right? And it's not a lot to go off of, but you will see something like it's an auth bypass using an alternative path or channel, right? And then you will take the newest version of the software in question and the older version of the software in question. And then you will optionally luck out completely because the software is built either in like .NET or Java or something that decompiles like very cleanly back to its near original source code. And then you take those two patched versions and you smash the files together and you look for differences between the patched version and the unpatched version. And that will give you a very strong indicator of where to look for recreating this CVE. And that is exactly what Caleb did on our team. So patch diffing, essentially just take the latest version, take the previous version, do exactly what I just said. And that's why Caleb said, oh yeah, maybe you could probably get to the setup page even if you've already set it up before. And so why is that? Because you can decompile this source like right back to its basically, you can decompile the code back to its original source, right? Because it's the IL, it's the in the .NET framework. And you can just kind of like take a good look at the difference between the two code bases. And if the newer one has like an error that it enforces or like a check that it enforces, you can basically be like, that's interesting, right? And there's a little bit of, actually, this part's not particularly interesting for our case, but this is, so the story goes, we took a look at this. Again, I'm in the Virgin Islands. I'm not doing any of this. I'm on vacation. But like John and Caleb and Jamie and everybody that night, like took a look at this. They realized that like a path sanitization error in the code base led to being able to access the setup page when you weren't supposed to access the setup page, right? And so this is the actual code that everybody was looking at when they decompiled it, right? So in that kind of highlighted handler right there, it's going to check to see if it's the I setup handler, right? So it's like checking to see if the server has already been set up, and then you fall into like a block that says like, oh, it's already in setup. It's already been set up, so you can't actually set it up again. So too long didn't read. This is all indicating that you could get to the setup page when you weren't supposed to get to the setup page. And of course, John, I don't want to steal your thunder here, but this is directly from your breakdown of the vulnerability. You too can exploit this. I'll do my best John Hammond impression. You too can exploit this. Here's how to do it. Step 1, go to the setupwizard.aspx page and add a /, and there is no step 2. That is the exploit. Again, I'm speeding through a lot of this. If you're interested, go to any of the number of webinars and on all kinds of things that we've done on this one. It has lots of excruciating detail. Read the blog post. But yeah, that is the crux of the error in the code that allowed you to get to the setup page when you were not supposed to be able to. So how do we turn this into a CTF challenge? Well, you take the general concepts and you don't want to make it one for one. You don't want to just rip Screen Connect right out, right? But you can use all of these facts to create like a tribute or like a mock-up of this particular type of exploitation. And so that is where we get HelpfulDesk. And here begins the demonstration of how this actually runs, right? Oh, look at that. Through the magic of TV, we already have one up and running, right? So if you, and this is kind of all about like web application exploitation methodology, right? So if you're familiar with like how to actually hack websites and how to enumerate and find things that are wrong with websites, I mean, this will all be kind of familiar to you. But let's say that you've never done any of that. You're going to land on the challenge page here. And you're going to say, welcome to HelpfulDesk, log in. We could try a little bit of like, whatever we want to do here with like SQL injection or something like that. But, you look for the indicators that something needs your attention, right? And that I think was this right here. Go to the security bulletins, and we have 3 versions, 2 of which patch something in the low severity range and 1 of which patches something in the critical severity range. Now, I don't know about you boys, but I would go there to start. Grab this one, download update 1.1, download update 1.2. And again, through the magic of television, I already have both of those in the patched and unpatched directories here. And the first thing that I would want to do is do like a file against like the executable in here. And that is actually just like a native Windows executable, which is kind of interesting. But if you also look at the DLL, you see that it is a mono/.NET compiled DLL. And that is when we go, oh baby, because that means that you can decompile this right into its original source code or something that's extremely approximate of its original source code. Now, why is that? Because C# and other languages that service the .NET framework, and even Java. This extends to Java as well. But like a lot of languages out there don't like immediately compile down into like machine code. There is an intermediate step. And so C# and the .NET framework are one of those that compile into what's known as the intermediate language, right? And the intermediate language is basically exactly what you're looking at right here. It's simple, clean, almost like human readable code that gets interpreted by like this intermediate runtime. So in other words, a lot of languages compile down to like, machine code, which is not human readable, but like a lot of languages have this kind of intermediate land, which is kind of, very easy to read, right? So you will take something like dnspy, and again, this is like, for all of you wannabe red teamers and exploit devs and people who want to pad your resume by looking for CVEs in 0 days, like pay attention, pay attention, because this is pretty good. You take something like dnspy. dnspy will take a compiled .NET executable and recreate its near approximate source code. And then that's what we have here in this first HelpfulDesk DLL right here, right? And so the interesting things, now you might have to take a lot of time like looking through all of this and like checking, okay, we've got the dashboard controller, we've got the account controller, but down here in the setup controller is the interesting part, right? But if you want to speed this up, you can take all of the source code that you see here and throw it into like a directory and then do like a mass diff from the patched version and the unpatched version. But I'm going to speed that up a little bit because I have already done so. I'm going to diff the two files of interest that will actually lead to our exploitation. And if you're actually doing this the day of, it's going to take a little bit more investigation than this. But at the end of the day, if you diff the two files together, you're going to find, ignore these like token things here. That's just kind of like, that's like an artifact of the decompilation. But what we do have here in the setupcontroller.cs files, and again, if you don't know where those came from, you can grab this directly. This is essentially the source code of the application and save that into a file called, setupcontroller.cs or what have you. And you will diff those two files together and you'll find this right here. And again, this is like you are playing Caleb in this case. You are going in and being like, all right, old version, new version, smash them together. Oh, this is kind of interesting. What do you think we can do with this? And because there is a new line of code that actually trims the ending slash on this particular variable, and we don't know what this really is yet, but there's a change here, right? And so if we take the facts, patched version, patches a critical severity. One of the only things that has actually changed in this application are these two lines right here. This is the new patched version, and this is the old version. Well, now we start to roll out the inductive reasoning. And so long story short, if you go here, let's go into the setup controller class. And this is essentially what happens when you access the setup wizard page, right? So the path itself here is checking a couple of things. And so when you make a post request to that page, it's going to hit this particular controller, right? It drops into this if block first. If the creds file path exists, spoiler alert, it does. That's just a username and password. I didn't want to make like a whole database for this application, so I just used like a JSON file. I don't recommend doing that in real life. So if that exists, we're going to drop here, and then we're going to check to see if the request path equals a certain value, right? And this is the unpatched version. So remember, we diffed the two together, and we have the newer version that trims the ending slash, and we have the older version that doesn't, right? And so if it equals this particular value and the cred file already exists, we're going to drop into this error block right here that says the server has already been set up. So what that means is that at first setup, this creds file path, if the server has not been set up yet, you're going to punch in the admin username and the admin password. That gets saved to file. You can imagine in real life that would do like a database query or something like that. But at the end of the day, it's going to check to make sure that that cred file path is good, is actually a file and it exists. And then if we check the path again at that point, it's going to say, nope, we're already set up. Oh, excuse me. It says this is already set up. We're going to return a 403. However, if you pass this block right here and you do not hit this error code, what happens? We drop out of this, we drop out of this, and then we return this view, right? And this is a bug. It's subtle, but it is a bug. In that case, we are checking a strict check on this particular string to make sure that the request matches that particular string. So what would happen at that point if I did, setup wizard, we go here and we say, oh, something's wrong. We've already set up the server, right? Because that cred file path already exists. But again, we're doing a very strict check here. We're checking to see that /setup wizard or /setup wizard, that actual request path is an exact match, equals, right? And so really, if you add a slash, if you add anything after that, what you're going to hit is this, right? And one more time, we dropped from checking that request path. We dropped past this error message. We never hit the 403, right? And we dropped to return to this view. And that view that we're looking at here is the HelpfulDesk setup page. And at this point, you can just do admin and then do like ASD, right? And it's going to say, all right, we're writing your credentials to file. Hey, welcome to HelpfulDesk. You've just set up a fantastic remote monitoring and management solution. And of course, you can just do admin, ASD. And I must have fat fingered that at some point. So I guess we could just do that one more time now, shall we? /ASD. Let's do something easier. Admin. One more time, redirecting. Admin. There we go. Look at that. And just for a little bit of added spice, I added that there are connected clients here. So you can imagine this isn't actually happening. This is just a little bit of like set dressing, I guess. But like you can go look through the file systems of these computers that are online, right? So view file system, see users administrator, grab the flag from there. And that is HelpfulDesk. And like I said earlier, it's not a repeat. It's not beat for beat, right? But it is like a rhyme. There's slight differences. We're not using ASPX files. There's a little bit of a difference in the exploitable code path, but like the general idea of the response to Screen Connect from February of earlier this year is kind of encapsulated in the CTF challenge, right? And so when you play this challenge, you are retracing the steps that the Huntress staff took to kind of identify the 0 day, figure out how to exploit it, and then kind of everything that followed after that. And so we've got a CTF challenge that kind of teaches how to recon for .NET Web App 0 days and how to exploit them. That's HelpfulDesk.
Well done, Matt. I love it. I think even just the small, I know, you boil it down, you're running the diff command, but that's still super duper important and not something that is particularly ever trained or taught to people. Yeah. It's just, I know, become a certain intuition after you've done this enough, we could just find the differences, delta, try to see what's new and old, and that will narrow down our search. Yep. But it's something that you still need to just put yourself in the situation to even do that in the first place. Yep. So unless you're playing like a capture the flag that will tell you, hey, this is what happens when new updates are available by a giant piece of software, that is how you can get a smaller search space. So cool stuff, all to say.
Like somebody said once, all bugs are shallow and reproducible once you know what they are, right? But the methodology to actually get there in the first place takes Herculean effort. This is just a way that we can kind of teach you a little bit about if you wanted to approach finding .NET Web App 0 days or kind of any 0 day like that, that's a little bit of the methodology. Those are some of the tools of the trade. So yeah. Anyway, I'll kick it over to John here. John, take it for MOVEable. What you got?
If I may, I would love to try my hand at a little more show and tell. But please let me say that we are going in an entirely different direction. I'm going to show you something completely different because this is a totally different challenge. But it still harkens back to and echoes just something that we've tried to showcase and discuss previously. Move It. The Move It transfer application that was struck by a vulnerability, really two, way back in the day, around the June timeline of 2023. And this has probably rightfully so been dubbed the biggest hack of 2023, just because of the huge amount of damage and leaked breach data that has come from it. And now even still, there are still some things that come out of the woodwork that add to the story. I think just yesterday, there was some threat actor or some user, even on Breach Forum or whatever dark web spot, Nameless was his handle, his cool, sweet hacker handle, trying to share, there's new findings from whatever Amazon potential supply chain third-party leak that all came from this incident. Move It. At least what we just kind of quickly tried to snapshot and understanding what that is, we just refer to it as Move It. on its own. But trying to bundle that up as a capture the flag challenge, we thought, well, we could be a little bit clever and cutesy. We can just call some application MOVEable. MOVEable, not move it, but MOVEable. And there is a demo. There's a long, hardy blog that we've covered way back when in the timeline, but I don't want to drag you down the rabbit hole with all of this. I'd love to show you the code and dig into the CTF challenge itself, because I know probably a lot of folks are thinking we're beating a dead horse when we just keep talking about move it. So let me spin it. Let me try to turn the table and twist things just a little bit. Inside of my Kali Linux virtual machine, because I know that's where I like to tend to nerd out and do all this stuff, I can open up a terminal. And let's get super duper behind the scenes. I'll literally move into the GitHub repository for our Huntress capture the flag. And you can see, look, this is the source where all of the challenges, the gross, gory behind the scenes of the work that we would do between some of your favorite challenges or CTF exercises that you tried to rip and run through. But MOVEable is what we're looking for, so I can change directory into that. And just for your fun insight and learning, all of the dynamic challenges that we end up trying to share, like HelpfulDesk, as you just saw from Matt, like MOVEable, that we'll dig into in just a moment, these are honestly Docker containers. So just that small, portable, little application running on a whim. And so we'll kind of containerize everything inside of a Docker file, so it's a captured, encapsulated, and standalone instance, right? Let me go ahead and build that just to show you how that's done. Docker build tag T, you would have that all exposed given your Docker file that you would architect and create if you were creating your own capture the flag challenge. And I'll open up the entire directory so we could kind of see it, because it will ultimately give us some source code that we could explore. But before I do dig into the source code, I do want to show you the application itself. So we'll just run it locally. Just for our own learning, we have the benefit of doing that. I know the capture the flag is off and over. The infrastructure is down. But look, we built the stuff. We can spin them back up. So let's get back over to Firefox, now knowing that, okay, it's going to be accessible to us on that port, just over on port 5000. Localhost 5000. Making that accessible to us. MOVEable. And all you have is a small, simple login. Just nothing fancy. We could try to log in, admin password, or whatever, but that will tell us it is incorrect. So what we've given to the player, the capture the flag, hey, participant here, is the source code. You literally were able to download a .zip file that would include all of the files pertinent to how this application came to life. And in the real scenario, in the actual affected and what was vulnerable software move it, this was just like the Screen Connect and HelpfulDesk analogy. It was C#. It was .NET. It was some assembly binaries that we could uncover with dnspy, with ilspy, with .peek. But truthfully, us trying to recreate this specific scenario, we just kept it cutesy. We kept it easy. We kept it CTF and capture the flag style in a Python Flask application. So no secrets, nothing hiding there, but you literally get to see the source code. We saved you that part of, decompiling or trying to uncover the bytecode IL in between the .NET assembly, because we'll just give you the strict source in Python. Now, I won't drag you through all of this, but I think there are some interesting things that we could probably look through, because ultimately we have that login capability that you just saw. And that login capability would take a username and password, but that would work within a database that isn't really tracking all of the strict usernames or passwords for an active session or a session cookie. In fact, there's no real cookie other than a table within the database called active sessions, based off of a username and a timestamp as to when that account has been active. So kind of interesting and odd in that design, but that is actually genuinely what was the structure for Move It transfer. And it was a really interesting part of the attack chain, because ultimately the first part started with unauthenticated authentication bypass. So without knowing username or password or credentials, it was still totally possible to gain access into the environment, log in without credentials. And the way that they did that was with SQL injection. Now, folks that work with some databases might be familiar with SQL, that structured query language, the select statements, select from, where, all these things. Interestingly, when you get to see the source code here, there is a handful of execute queries, the c.execute, where we have a cursor to work with the database and its connection. But there is one oddball. I don't know if you're able to see it all too often, but execute script tends to show up here and there. And execute script actually kind of differs, because that is going to allow you to kind of concatenate on and add multiple different SQL queries. Like you could add a semicolon to say, look, I don't want to just insert into a table or select from. I want to semicolon start another little sub command or little multi-query you could add in the mix. So that is what you could tack onto, and then you would have to work around what would be a deny list for sensitive characters with this db clean function that they tried to clean up and mitigate some of the potential attack surface. You might have seen that just above. db clean would say, look, if there are any bad characters that could mean, someone's trying to hack us or do some clever tricks, we don't want any like space characters in there, or single quotes to start a new string, or even double quotes to start a new string. So they have a pretty weak implementation where we would just replace that character out. So it removes that and won't happen again. We could still, putting our hacker hat on, acting as the adversary, work around that. And if we put that all together, we may very well be able to actually log in and then abuse and leverage the actual capability of uploading or downloading files with the Move It transfer application, or MOVEable in this case. I will streamline this because I do want to give Adam plenty of time to be able to showcase his. I'd love to walk through the solve script and talk you through how this can automate that process. But at the end of the day, remote code execution came from the Move It application for real with deserialization of a .NET object. So you could use tools and maybe some gadgets that folks are familiar with like YSO Serial. YSO Serial.net is a phenomenal tool to be able to rip through some of that. But in our case, we'll do some Python deserialization with just the classic typical pickle library. Again, pretty common and well known for, I think, a lot of the capture the flag players in that sort of culture and scene. But what we could do is now having a better understanding as to what limits us with our db clean function, the deny list we need to circumvent around, and eventually being able to upload or download a file, we could build a solve script. We could build out a solution that encapsulates all this, and I'll try to just cover this in a quick and cursory way. But the way that we could get around the limitations of a select from statement in SQL, really, that is something where we could say, you know what? We could replace the spaces that are there with actual comments. And this is a weird gimmick and trick of SQL, especially SQLite, where you could really include beginning and ending of a multi-line comments, and that will be treated and act as a space in syntax. And if we ever wanted to include other string characters, like trying to add on a double quote or single quote credential potentially, we could avoid using the single quotes or double quotes by literally treating them as pure ASCII characters and then concatenating them over and over and over again. So that looks very strange and very stupid, but maybe I took the character for the letter C and I tried to add on the character for the letter R, and then I tried to add on the character for the letter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That was a clever, cutesy, stupid thing that still adds a hurdle for the player and makes you refine your potential SQL injection payload. But we do this adding it on to our insert active sessions capability. Remember that semicolon that I mentioned, to give us our own rogue session as if we had logged in. And then try to upload or add into the files table to movable, upload and download files, and then try to retrieve them with, again, using the SQL injection capability that we have. So I know this looks like a lot of nonsense. I know this looks like, code that might make your eyes glaze over, but truthfully, this could trigger the payload to have potentially a reverse shell. That command and control, that capability and access in the Linux world, I'll admit, not strictly Windows here, but using Bash to get a callback and then control and own the server. So let me do the magic trick. That's enough of me yapping. Let's do some fireworks here. In another terminal, that thing is running. What I would like to do is start a listener so that I'm ready to catch and grab the connection as to we force that reverse shell. I will need to spin that up with a totally public IP address because it will go over the internet. So I'll use like ngrok, one of the quick solutions for easily spinning something up out on the open internet. And you'll see my email there, so please don't hack me. Whoa, spooky, scary. But I just want to be able to grab the public IP address and then use our solve script. So now we'll keep an eye on this middle tab, right where I have my netcat listener running. But let's sort of fire the gun here to use our solve script against that local target, the port that we know that it is listening on. And then I just want to pass in and tell our solve script that add the capability to refer back to or call back to our home base, HQ. Fingers crossed, we'll now get our reverse shell, as you can see. And if I try to see, the who am I command, who am I, what capability do I have? If we wanted to look for our special privileges with sudo, super user do, we are in fact someone that can run any command as root. So let me sudo bash to now see, I am the root user. And I can hop around, do whatever I really wanted to, move to the top of the file system, move into the root directory, and then find the flag itself. So cooking show magic, a little TV show, fun paparazzi. We have captured the flag for MOVEable and a quick crash course speed run.
Beautiful. Well, one thing I really want to highlight there. So like for any of you that have done kind of like some basic hacking like this, you kind of are familiar with standing up like a netcat listener and catching a reverse shell. But all of that, I'd be willing to bet most of the activity that you've done is like in a local instance, right? So like you can like publish, listen on port 9001 and then exploit a web app that's on the same like, network as you are and then immediately catch a shell. So pay attention because like in life and in CTFs like this, you won't be able to just immediately catch a shell in your local network unless you have like a VPN connection in that case. But like what John did there was like catch a shell with ngrok. And that is, that's like it's not like taught readily. It's not super apparent like to a lot of CTF players that you're like, I'm going to have to gracefully catch a shell over the open internet. So interesting little tidbit, a nice little upskill kind of thing to be able to understand that when you get a reverse shell coming over the internet, you're not going to be able to just immediately catch it on a local port. You need some way to ferry that information back to you. So cool stuff.
My goodness, though, I've been talking for way too long. Adam, how are you doing, my friend? I'd like to give you the show.
I'm good. Hello, everyone. This is actually my first Tradecraft Tuesday. So I'm going to present some slides. I do not have... Let's see, screen. Let's get the right screen here. All right, we should all see my screen. It's the same exact slideshow.
Looking good.
I don't have any fancy demonstrations. I'm going to be talking about a challenge that I created that I was so blessed to have run on the last day of the event, which was Palimpsest. This is a word that I picked. That was some weird old English word that I didn't hear used very often, but seemed to fit in with the theme. You'll see what we talk about as we go through. So this isn't something that Huntress has seen. This isn't a CVE. This isn't anything like that. This is a really weird, esoteric hacker bit of tradecraft that I have just been obsessing over for the last 2 years or so. Back in 2022, Kaspersky found a in the wild version of this where a hacker was using fileless malware to store the last stage of a Trojan within the Windows event log. And they were specifically using shell code within the Windows event log. And I just thought that was amazing and brilliant. And the fact that attackers can use the Windows event log to store malicious codes this way means that they can use it to live off the land, ferry anything in, and you'll see in a bit what I mean when I say fileless, but in some form or fashion, how you store the files truly makes it a fileless technique. So looking at all this, I thought it would be incredibly fun to store my movie collection this way, and it worked. And then I turned it into a CTF challenge. So I want to talk a little bit about the basics of what the Windows event log is before I dive too deep into the hacker tradecraft with this. So the Windows event log is this ugly thing that you see in front of you. It runs in the MMC console, and it is it's just this disgusting structured data format that Windows writes all of its events to. Under the hood, it's all written in XML, but when you look at it in this format, it's kind of confusing with what you're looking at. So I want to highlight a couple different fields that I used for this challenge. One of them is the log names here on the left. So when you're sifting through your event logs, the log name is the name of the log that it's stored in, which in this case is application. And this is the category or type of log and where the event should be stored when an event fires. And the next one is the log source. You can see the column highlighted here, and you'll see a little bit later how we manipulated this for the challenge. This is the component or source that generated the event when it writes this. I believe Windows mostly just uses this for searching for events later on and making it easier to correlate. And then finally, we have the event ID, which is a unique identifier that's attached to each event. In practice, these are completely arbitrary, and every single event ID that you see for this challenge was completely made up on the spot. I think I literally just used get random and then sorted it to generate these. So what really drove the inspiration for this was taking a look at the security of this. This is a really cool living off the land technique, but if I can only do this as an administrator, it's not all that fun. So in looking through the different logs and who has write access to what logs, I found that the interactive user has full write access to the application event log. You do not have to elevate to administrator to write files, scripts, payloads to the event log. So this wasn't really illustrated within the challenge because it was a static file download, but I did build this entire challenge as an unprivileged user in a Windows box. So moving on from that, here is a bit of PowerShell to give you an example of how to send a message to the Windows event log. You can see we set our log source type and event ID and then the message block. And you can see in the top there how it'll display within Windows. Last year, I created a challenge called Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where I did a very, very similar technique, except I stored malicious PowerShell within the event part of within the message part of the event. So you would see it up in this general text box here where it says sign up for Tradecraft Tuesday. I had stored malicious PowerShell. This year, I wanted to do something a little bit more tricky. So I tried to store an entire file in the event log. And what I quickly found was that there is actually a limit to how big an individual event can be. And I didn't have enough time to put all of this into a single slide deck. I only have a few minutes to talk about this, but I have to give a huge shout out to Tim Fowler at Black Hills. He gave a presentation on event log manipulation and all this way, way, way back several years ago. And digging through my notes from that presentation, I found that there is a hard-coded limit in the Windows event logs for like Windows that you can only have a Windows event entry be 32 kilobytes in size. So this is hard coded. You can't get around it. So how am I going to store a file in the event log? I don't want to limit my files to less than 32 kilobytes in size. That seems like no fun. So what I found was that I have to split the file. So the file that I chose for this is a goofy little video. You'll see it on one of the later slides. It's free real estate. So the video file itself was 142 kilobytes in size, and I wanted to give players something to chew on to reassemble it in the right order. So I split it up into 1.42 kilobyte chunks so that it would equal 100 event entries total. So given that 32 event kilobyte limit, I split it up a bunch of times. In digging through this event log storage hacker tradecraft, I found the LP raw data buffer, which I still haven't figured out why this exists. I'm sure some Microsoft graybeard can come out and tell me like, oh, there's this random event that needs to store binary data for some reason. But LP raw data is a buffer within a Windows event entry. Depending on how you look at it, it looks at like its own event field, but you can store binary data within it. I don't have to convert the binary to a string to store it in the event message or do anything funky. I can just dump the raw binary into the event message. So I hid it in there. I split up the event 100 times in the small chunks, and I wrote it to the event log. And as you can see from the screenshot, there are 100 events with random severity levels. I just used get random across the severity levels that were available. I did a source of MSI installer, but the I is actually a lowercase L. So if you figured that out, it was a really easy way to figure out which events were actually malicious. And then when you look at the general details here, you can't even see that there's binary data or a file or anything hidden within the event entry. It looks like a completely normal event entry. But when you take a look at the XML view in this lower screenshot here, you can actually see the chunk of binary data in there. And then if you were to break it out in like Linux or some third-party tool, you'd see it a lot easier. They're really disgusting looking. So how do I tell players that there is an MP4 file stored in the event log? I decided to take this and make it like a forensic challenge mixed with a malware challenge. Like I said, I love living off the land. I love building malware, and I love PowerShell. All of my challenges are written in some disgusting form of PowerShell. So I wrote a reassembly script in PowerShell. This is it right here. I think I ripped this right out of the solution script. This was the de-obfuscated version of the payload that the players were given. Sets a bunch of variables. The first variable there you see at the top is the event ID range of the random characters that I set. The second one opens a path for file for writing, which would be flag.mp4 in the app data folder. The third one is a get event log query string that will look up all of the events that we just wrote, sort them by the index, which is the order that they were written to disk. So it will sort them in, I think it's descending order by index, so they're written top to bottom. And then it writes them to the flag.mp4 file, strips the binary data out of that field before writing it, and then it closes it. Fairly straightforward. So I decided to obfuscate the hell out of it, and that is what I turned it into. It doesn't look like much here, but what this little piece of script here does is it reaches out to a subdomain that I set up on a different challenges domain. And I hid the second stage payload in the TXT record of the domain. And it would execute that payload as base disk 64. Did I include it? I did not. Because of the mangled mess that code looks like when you're dealing with malware challenges, I didn't want to include the entire payload in the slide deck. So this is the second stage. The third stage was a base 64 blob. And then what I did with this is I hid it inside of a scheduled task in Windows. I actually went into a VM, set all this up, make sure the payload actually fired, and then I extracted all of the components and bundled them up in a file. So this is an actual scheduled task that was provided to the players to add some sense of realism or persistence. And that is the same exact mangled PowerShell you saw before that'll fire the payload and all that stuff. So in summary, what I did with this challenge to make it interesting was I stuffed a payload in the event logs. I chopped it up and stuffed it in there. And the reason I call this file is because unless you know that file is there and you know how to reassemble it, it's just binary data floating around. It is completely disassembled. It's not in its assembled state. If you're doing this with an executable second stage of malware, it's essentially fileless, and it is hidden in there until it's reassembled and executed. So I set this up with an MP4 to be silly. Players seemed to think it was funny. And then I also gave players a bundle of log files for them to dig through and do the forensics part of the challenge. And then the difficult part of the challenge that fits into Matt's little slide at the beginning with the little sweet spot of learning with challenging players enough is that when they unraveled the obfuscated PowerShell or found the data in the event logs or whatever, they would have to use their own tools and expertise to put it back together. I did not give them any indication for how to do this. I saw a lot of people write their own PowerShell scripts. I actually found a few new techniques that I wasn't aware of that I'm going to use for whatever version of this comes out in the future. I saw people write Python scripts for this. There were a couple people who included in their write-ups one-liners to do this. It was really, really cool to see how everybody did this. And that was the goal of the challenge, is to challenge people to do their own thing with this. And then finally, this is the flag file that I stuck in there. This is a GIF for the sake of the slide deck, but it was an actual MP4 file because it is free real estate to store stuff in your event logs. And that is the end of my slide deck. John, Matt, do you guys want to tap dance while I drink some water?
I think just a fantastic, fitting way to end the CTF challenge. And I want to point out that, so Adam's being a little too humble, I think. Adam led off by saying, we haven't seen this in the wild or anything like that. Like, this is a TTP, but it's not something that we've dealt with. I'm going to call you out, Adam. Putting something into the Windows event log like that in binary form, sure, maybe we haven't seen that. But invoke expression, executing a text record to execute code, we have absolutely seen before. Plus, there's obfuscated PowerShell. We deal with that every single day, right?
There were components.
No, yeah, there were components of this that we fight all the time, right? I love that invoke expression right off of a text record is just a little piece of red team. Mwah, chef's kiss. Fantastic work, gents. Thanks for coming along on this one. I mean, I think we can finally put the CTF to bed, and we hope that you enjoyed kind of just learning. If we were going to summarize it, it's just what's a day in our shoes look like? Well, if you play the CTF, you might get just a little glimpse into what it's like to be a SOC analyst, an exploit developer, a malware reverse engineer, or something like that. So I hope you enjoyed the CTF if you played. I hope you enjoyed Tradecraft Tuesday if you watched today. Where in the world is Huntress? I guess we're in Newark this week. This week, right? And we're in Melbourne. If you're down under, come on and check us out. And then next up, Tradecraft Tuesday, Christina and I will be presenting a research project that we presented at B-Sides New York City a month ago about M365 and Azure applications and how they are used maliciously. Fun kind of tradecraft in terms of OAuth applications, application attacks, that kind of thing. So that's all we've got for you today. We would be happy to take some questions. We got a couple minutes left.
I think we got one in there about In Plain Sight. If you want to talk about that one, John.
I will do my best, and I can share. I might be able to drop it in the chat. There is a CTF write-ups channel that was in the Discord, in the Huntress Capture the Flag Discord server. And there has a good amount of folks that had shared their community-written write-ups. We don't really try to hold all the authors or ourselves to put together official write-ups because, hey, making challenges on their own is enough of a task. But for the players, if they were willing to put some together, I've seen Mark, I think, share his. I dropped a link for that. And there are others that are in that channel if you are interested. But huge thanks for the interest in Plain Sight. That was one of the hardcore brain melt challenges put together by Nordgaren, who just happens to be my video editor, and love him to death. I will sing his praises any chance that I can. He put together this incredible, crazy tough, at least reverse engineering task to go and cut through some Rust code. And that challenge on its own seemed to be the gate and the filter between determining the top 10, top 100, top 50 spots. And it was phenomenal because for a long, it's a balancing act to host a Capture the Flag for 31 days throughout a whole month, right? Especially you have to have challenges that release every day for that. And there's a certain amount of, for lack of a better word, padding that needs to be done in the first couple week or 2 weeks. So it's we'll have some warm-ups, we'll have some small, tiny trinket stuff in there, but then we're going to need to turn the heat on and get some hardcore stuff closer to the end. So I am very, very grateful with his incredible contribution there. I know that challenge did some damage.
Yeah. And then we had one other question, John P. from YouTube. Why did you do this to us? For the love of the sport, for the love of the game, for the love of the community, You are all champions. You are all in that zone of proximal development. If you just push yourself, if you take it upon yourself to be an autodidact and teach yourself the things that, if the puzzle pieces make sense, but you don't know how to put them together, and you can self-study to the point that they do make sense and you do know how to put them together, that's a win. That's a win for the community. It's a win for you. It's a win for everybody. So it's for the love of the game. Is that it?
Yeah, I don't see any other questions.
Are we good? We hit it to the minute, 2:00. Everybody, thank you so much.
The CTF is over.
The CTF is over. Oh my goodness. Thanks for coming through. Everybody take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Happy hacking. We'll see you next Tradecraft Tuesday. We'll see you down the road. Bye.